Reasons for Exploration. The Age of Exploration, Unit 6. The Age of Exploration began in the late 1400s as nations in Europe began to explore areas around the world. This happens for two main reasons. First of all, they have sufficient motives for exploration that exist at the same time that there's money to support the exploration. Secondly, there were advances in knowledge and technology that made exploration possible. Let's look at each of these factors in more detail. Motives for exploration. Sometimes this is summed up as God, glory, and gold. If you will consider the statement by Bartolomeu Dias, a Portuguese explorer, you'll start to understand why people wanted to explore. When asked why he explored, he answered as follows: to serve God and His Majesty, to give light to those who were in darkness, and to grow as rich as all men desire to do. So you see here that he's emphasizing that exploration was part of his service to God and to his King, the Majesty, that he was interested, or at least said that he was interested, in bringing Christianity to people. That's where he's talking about light and darkness. And he emphasizes that he would like to be rich as a result of exploration. It's also a motivation for countries to explore. European nations wanted new trade routes for goods from Africa and Asia. They'd been introduced to these goods as a result of the Crusades, and so demand for the goods increased. Demand for spices was particularly high because the spices were valuable in terms of preserving and seasoning the food that they had. The other factor in trade is that the existing trade routes were a combination of land and sea routes, and they were largely controlled by Muslims and Italians, and they were very expensive to use. So European countries wanted to find a new way to reach Africa and Asia so that they could trade without having to use the Muslims and the Italians as middlemen, so to speak, in these business transactions. Explorers also wanted to earn fame and glory for themselves and for their countries. Most of the people who became explorers had some sense of adventure and ambition to succeed. Maybe they hadn't been successful in other endeavors in their own countries, and so they thought by going out to explore that they could get rich, they could become famous, and they could receive favors as a result of their work. They were also curious about the world beyond Europe, what it looked like, what sorts of plants and animals lived there, and just where things were and what they were like. Explorers and the people who sponsored them were also very eager to make money from exploration, and this might be in the form of profit from trade, but it could also be in the form of resources that they hoped they would find in these new lands, like gold and silver. Finally, people had a desire to spread Christianity to other areas of the world. Both Catholic and Protestant missionaries followed explorers into new areas, and the missionaries wanted to convert the indigenous people, or the people who were already living there, to Christianity. And sometimes they attempted to do that using some pretty bad methods to force people to adopt Christian religious practices. In addition to these motives for exploration, there were advances in knowledge and technology. First of all, there were advances in cartography or map making. Printed copies of books about map making were translated into Latin and became more widely available, and that increased people's curiosity about exploration and the world beyond where they lived. As their knowledge increased, the maps became more accurate, so that most people had an understanding of the Earth as a sphere rather than a flat surface. And people began to have an accurate placement of the continents and where different places were located. Better maps made it easier to navigate from place to place. And perhaps the most famous map maker of the time period was a man named Mercator, who created maps that had lines of latitude and longitude on them that improved the accuracy of travel by ship. Other advances in knowledge and technology included improvements in ships and navigation tools. Ships were changed in terms of their design, and they adopted a design that was known as the caravel, and those ships were lighter, faster, and easier to maneuver. The ships also had shallow bottoms, which meant that they could sail very close to the coastline. And they adopted the Muslim practice, actually, of using triangular sails, which allowed the ships to sail regardless of wind direction. The shape of the sail enabled the ship to catch the wind and sail either with the wind or into the wind. Improved compasses made navigation easier, and astrolabes allowed sailors to more accurately calculate distance and direction in relation to the equator. So they might not know exactly where they were going, but they had some idea of the direction and distance that they were traveling. Other advances in knowledge and technology revolved around weapons. At the time the exploration begins, Europeans have an advantage in weaponry over the indigenous or native people. Sailors could fire cannons at targets on shore without leaving the safety of their ships, and the weapons of the indigenous peoples were no match for the power of European guns, armor, and horses. This is the end of our video on reasons for exploration. If you need to rewatch or rewind any portion of this video, please feel free to do so. Make sure that you have finished the guided notes that go along with this video. Thanks for watching.